Hello and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. It is Monday, April the 10th, and it is 9:20 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. And yes, it has been a while since we've done one of these, March 23rd. Scott and I have kind of been going our separate directions here, but we're able to get together this morning and figured we'd throw one of these together, and we'll probably put one on the end of this week too. After we get some more, what I'm sure will be in a active week, transfer portal stuff, spring football, all that stuff, baseball, and we'll hit on all that stuff today. We're going to start though with Scott. Had a trip to Japan, which is why he was not on the podcast for the last few weeks. I went to Chicago for a club volleyball tournament this past weekend, which messed us up last Thursday. But Scott, why don't you give us an overview of the Japan trip? We talked about it before we started recording. You can leave out the horrendous return trip with lost luggage.
Yeah, I don't want to put everybody to sleep because I'll just say that my jet lag is still pretty significant because of all of that. But no,
Scott's been up since 1 a.m. today.
Yeah.
So if he fades or falls asleep on us, that's why.
Yeah, and I was I'm trying to get to a normal schedule, and that's very difficult right now. But overall, it was a great trip. I mean, going to a place that I'd never been to, and only really seen and read about on television and magazines, and went to a volcano, went to Mount Fuji. Unfortunately, it was cloudy that day. Experienced the subway system in one of the biggest cities in the world, and but it's a great country because there are most of the people who work with the public have at least a slight working knowledge of English, just helpful if nothing else. And so yeah, and my favorite part were that I would love to bring back to this country are the bullet trains. They go about 300 miles an hour. So it's like kind of getting on an airplane at the runway right before it takes off. That's about how fast you go. And so we went to this place called Cat Island, which my daughter had been pushing for me to do since with our cats here. I'm like the cat whisperer, and so we went to this Cat Island, but it's like a 4-hour drive that we got there in an hour and a half. I mean,
Wow.
I was like telling my wife, God, it'd be great for not only because my kids live in Minnesota to be on a bullet train, but imagine going to Chicago from here. I mean,
yeah, I just made the drive this weekend.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
including inner city driving for 3 days.
I always say happiness.
Yeah, your nerves are like, ah.
I know. I got to go there next month, and it's like happiness is Aurora in your rearview mirror.
Yeah, exactly. What is a Cat Island?
It is this little island in the middle. I mean, it's in the ocean. And so it took about an hour-long ferry ride from this little town, like I said, like 3.5 hours north of Tokyo. And we took this hour-long ferry, and it's this island where there's only a couple of houses and a couple of people, but it's filled with cats. The cats,
are they like
there.
Feral cats?
Yeah, they're feral, but they feed them and stuff, but they're mostly feral on this really little island, and they have these shrines and everything. Like I don't know if it's Shinto religion or what, but so yeah, we walked around, and these cats would follow us around, and because I'm like the cat whisperer to my kids, and so yeah, it was something else. So we got
how was the food?
It was good. The when we did get to the Japanese places, but it's a little bit. We stayed in like this Airbnb, and I mean, tiny doesn't begin to describe it. Think about New York hotel rooms, and it's kind of that way.
Yeah.
And so most of the places in our neighborhood you couldn't really tell if they were restaurants or not. So it was kind of half and half, where we had restaurant food versus just like we brought over like Pop-Tarts and stuff like that. But yeah, it wasn't quite the experience of going to, like, because of the language barrier.
Yeah.
There is some fear there, but when I did have the Japanese food, it was fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you were telling me before we started recording about and we'll use this to segue into women's basketball, your ability to watch over there in the middle of the night.
Yeah, the first game, it was a primetime game here, but over there it was like at noon, Japan
Final
time.
Four game?
The Final Four game against South Carolina. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was in this the Tokyo Station. It's kind of like Grand Central Station, except there's just shops everywhere, and it's outside the Imperial Palace, which is about a mile away. And I was going to that. I was just with my son, and I'm like, first half, I'm like scrolling through Twitter, I'm refreshing it like constantly. And then finally I'm like, I got to figure out a way to watch this second half here. And so we sat outside and because I couldn't get it on ESPN Plus because it doesn't come on in Asia. Well, I took off the Wi-Fi, used the 3G, and it worked. And I'm like, wow, this is great. And so I watched that game, and then we went to the Imperial Palace and saw the cherry blossoms and stuff. And then the championship game, though, was at 3:30 a.m. in Japan. And my wife is, we're season ticket holders because my wife goes to all the games, and I only went twice with her to sit in the stands because I said it just feels too much like work.
And those seats are awful.
Yeah, I know. They need
to do something with the seats in Carver, because I sat for the Georgia game with my daughter in the stands, and I, like you, I don't sit in the stands much, but I was like, man, for people with bad backs, this sucks.
Yeah, exactly. And we both do.
Yeah.
We're old dudes. But, so we got up at 3:30 and watched the game. It's kind of same deal, 3G, and, kind of horrified by the officiating. Not to probably like anybody. And I'm sure we can talk about this, is I thought LSU was the better team that day. I'm not, if they played a World Series, maybe Iowa wins, but at least that day, LSU was the better team. But the officiating did not meet the moment. And I thought that was really disappointing because, and it's one of those things that I know I've tweeted about several times, that if in watching women's games, the officiating is not very consistent. And some games, it is really physical, like way beyond what you'd allow in a men's game. In other games, it's like this one was like touch fouls where, God, everybody was in foul trouble by the second quarter. And so that was really disappointing to watch, I think, over there. And, and of course, there was, controversies that, frankly, I just wasn't aware of at the end of the game, because I think with a minute to go and it was over, I'm like, we don't have to watch this anymore. So It wasn't until afterwards that I saw the hubbub that continues to go. It was even on SNL, this on Saturday night. So
you think, I was thinking about this, and somebody brought this up to me, I think on the mailbag last week. For those that don't know, these officials are not full-time. They have like real jobs in the world and do this as like a second job. Mm-hmm. With all the money in the NCAA that these schools have, is it time, men and women, to get full-time officials, particularly for the revenue sports?
That's a great question, Rob. And I don't know,
and would that make a difference? Would they be better if they were doing it full-time? I don't know.
I mean, most of them do it pseudo full time if they're basketball officials that, they're bouncing around. We talk about their schedules that they're too compact. Yeah,
maybe that's a problem too. There aren't enough.
Yeah.
And they're being asked to do too much.
Yeah. But when you get to the Final Four, that shouldn't be an issue. I mean, the issues are when you see.
Agreed. But we heard official complaints for men's basketball throughout the whole season. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, I think as the women's game gets more popular, and this year has helped that a lot, it's going to, it'll be magnified more if the officiating is bad.
Well, yeah, and it certainly was. I mean, when you have the most watched game in women's basketball history, that was beyond what every NBA game this year to this
Yeah.
point. And the playoffs, I'm sure we'll have a few that are ahead of it. But I mean, when you get 10 million people on average who watch a game, and Caitlin Clark is a transcendent player, not just in Iowa, but around the world and around the United States. And people are tuning in to watch her, especially, I mean, the way she's been able to meet the moment in the postseason with how she performed against Louisville and then South Carolina. And now, even against LSU in a loss. But to see the inconsistent officiating, not only with the foul calls, but, when you have getting a technical foul for an innocuous ball move. I mean, it wasn't really, there was nothing to it. And then to see, it was all, I hate to say this, but it was almost like pro wrestling with Kim Mulkey being out on the floor and yelling and stuff. And it's kind of like in pro wrestling when, you have a tag team match and people are coming over and hitting them and then they're distracting the officials. And then, Iowa got a warning at some point. I mean, just, you've got to be better than that.
They're inconsistent with that coaching box anyway, on both men and women. Izzo is on the floor all the time.
Right.
And if you at Carver, there's not a lot of room on the sidelines. A lot of us, because I shoot the south end of the arena. I shoot photos in that first half. So a lot of times I'll know, because I'm all the way on the left, I'll know where that coach is because he'll be in my way. He'll be in my vision literally on the court. Izzo's the worst, but there are others that do the same thing, and not as bad as Mulkey was ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, to be out on the middle of the floor and some of those, that's just uncalled for. To be, in the official's path, and then, after I retweeted it or whatever, I had a lot of like LSU fans. Oh, see, the official's the one pushing her. Oh, come on,
The official's got to go up and down the court. It's got to be able to have a pathway to run down the opposite end of the court.
It's like it should be like, college football where it's like sideline warning, LSU, and maybe that needs to be a factor. It's like, hey, you get a sideline warning, make it known, and announced. And then after that, it's a technical or
meet with the coaches before the game and say, listen, we know sometimes it's tight here and you guys are kind of moving out on the floor a little bit, but we'll give you a warning.
Yeah.
Remind you the first time, but the second time, boom, you're getting one.
Yeah, exactly. And for Iowa to get one and, warning, and for Mulkey not, I mean, that just was ridiculous. I mean, and I don't buy into the conspiracy theories and stuff. I just, unless I have proof, I'm just not going there. But it was really unfortunate because at a moment like that, you want the officiating to be pretty much invisible. They call the fouls when they need to be called. There's going to be some that people disagree with, but by and large, just kind of be in the background. And it really came to the forefront, and that's really unfortunate. And then, of course, what Lisa said afterwards, I thought she struck the right tone and said, we couldn't have a conversation. And I thought that, and she said that was really disappointing. And I think that's really the crux of everything with this, which was, man, and that's, I'm not going to go there, but that's what officials need to be ready for is you're going to, we know how Fran gets. And if Fran was coaching in that game, he'd have been thrown out a long time ago. And, I don't see any of those officials being able to react the way, Kelly Pfeiffer did, and just take it. So that's something that the NCAA has to impress upon these conferences and the women's basketball sport, that they just have to be better. And maybe it's as simple as not necessarily being full-time officials, but you also have to do an Olympic sport in officiating, or you have to be around it just to continue to catch up your eyes, your hand-eye coordination, because frankly, the sport is being lofted. It's on a rocket ship. And if the officiating can't catch up, people are going to be turned off by it. They just are. And that's for the casual fans. And if you don't capture them, it's never going to progress from where it is right now.
Yeah, it's just strange because they kind in a way they earn the right to referee these games. They get graded throughout the season, and then basically you're chosen because of your work throughout the year to work the bigger games than the NCAA tournament, the national championship, Final Four, what have you. So these officials must have graded out pretty well throughout the year, and I don't know if it was one of them that was having an off day, or all three of them, or two of the three. But it's unfortunate on that stage where you finally are getting to the point where there are a lot of eyes on your sport. You have a chance to continue to grow it. That was such a big discussion, a topic of discussion coming out of that game. The officials were where it should have been, the level of play and how good these women are at this sport. And for people that haven't watched it before, and getting a chance to watch it for the first time, it's a shame that was such a focus of the final game of the season.
Right. I mean, it's hard to remember a lot of the game itself because of, the multiple controversies and sticking with the officiating theme. To have that again be a focal point, it's a 0 for the NCAA. It's a 0 for the game, and that has to be improved. And a lot of times the NCAA, when it comes to women's basketball, wants to show the growth with women officials, with diverse officials, and that's great, and I hope they're the best. But sometimes I've seen it before where they try to just send a message more than they try to have the best officials on the floor. And I'm not saying anyone in particular was right or wrong on that. I'm just saying that sometimes they have to be careful with that, because at those moments you want them not to be invisible, but not to be at the forefront. And unfortunately, by calling fouls, and the fouls that were called were pretty evenly bad and evenly destructive when you have Monica Zanano. And
the second foul on Angel Reese was ridiculous.
Exactly.
And she sat out most of the first half because of that.
Right. Caitlin Clark got 2 offensive fouls, and it wasn't, it was just kind of movement. And then again, her technical foul. I mean, good God, it was really a poorly officiating game. Now, getting to the game part of it, LSU shot lights out in that second quarter. Iowa's not known for its defense. We know that, at least in this sport. And, when a team's hitting like that from 3, you just tip your cap. I mean, they have lost games before, so it's not like that a perfect season went up in smoke. But LSU shot so well in the first half, but then when it came down and Iowa, boom, 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 3 straight trips up the floor in the third quarter, they're getting 3-pointers or 3-point plays, and they cut the lead to 6. At that point, they're ready to make a move, and that's when Zanano got called, and then the technical happened. And I'm not saying that they're going to win, but I'm saying that it really reshaped the game. And probably the best person I've heard discuss it was Stacey Dales, who's, if anybody knows, is on NFL Network as a reporter, and she does an
and was a great player,
right? And
Oklahoma.
And she talked about it on Rich Eisen's podcast. And here she was, an Olympian, a WNBA player for 10 years, played at Oklahoma in their Hall of Fame jersey, retired, and she talked significantly about the way it was officiating and well beyond what you or I could do. And so this is now a week old, but if you really want to know a little bit more, what Stacey had to break down on Rich Eisen's podcast and radio show from last Monday was outstanding. So I would recommend listening to that. I listened to it on the plane, among the many other things I listened to and watched, and learned a lot about 3 Mile Island. I watched that 4-part Netflix series on the way there and way back, and that was pretty good too. Felt like 3 Mile Island after the game too.
Yeah, for me, from a basketball standpoint, and I may have mentioned this on the mailbag last week, I can't remember, but Alexis Morris to me was the difference in that game. Her ability to hit mid-range jump shots and Iowa allowing her to do that, that was like what they were going to give up.
Mm-hmm.
She made almost every one. And then on the other end of the floor, you could tell she watched a lot of film of Caitlin, because Caitlin likes that right dribble, left foot step back.
Yeah, yeah.
Morris was right on her. As soon as she took the step back, Morris was like, boom, right there.
Yeah.
And Caitlin still had a good game, but she made her work for it. And that's all you really can do with Caitlin, is make her earn her points. And then obviously the other components of the foul trouble and, the girl that came off the bench and was averaging 2 points and hit 21 in the first half, all those threes.
Right.
I mean, when you said at the top, Scott, that LSU played better, it just played better that game.
Yeah.
If you take away the poor officiating and the ending of the game with the controversy of that, LSU just played better in a one-game setting. And that's what the NCAA tournament is. It's one game.
Yeah. Well, if you think about all of these, the upsets that we see in the NCAA tournament, in the men's tournament, the 314s on an occasion, or what happened with Purdue and Fairleigh Dickinson.
Right.
If they played 7 times, Purdue's winning 6 and usually 7. How it lost that one, I'll never know. But you only have to play once, and that's why it's such a thrilling tournament. And in this case, just like if Iowa played South Carolina multiple times, it may not win more than 1 or 2.
Right.
South Carolina is an outstanding team that handled itself very well, throughout the process. I was very impressed with Dawn Staley and Leah Boston and just everybody associated with that program. That's a class outfit. And, on a one-game setting, LSU shot lights out. Iowa couldn't keep up. Iowa tried and wasn't successful. And maybe had Monica Zanano not been in foul trouble early, she might have had an opportunity to make it a different type of game. But, I'm not going to take away from what LSU did. LSU won, no question.
And as far as the end of the game controversy, I talked about this again, I think last week on the mailbag, so I'm not going to throw a lot out there. Let Scott share his thoughts on, again, he was overseas, way overseas, and did not he said he turned it off once it was decided, so missed in real time what happened at the end of the game. And really, a lot of us, we didn't see a lot of it at the end of the game. It was like, an hour after the game, then the videos, how it goes on social media, the videos are coming out, and then the commentary starts, and then the drama starts. For me, this is the way I view it. And I played basketball in high school, always has been my favorite sport. There's a culture in basketball of trash talking. It goes back for the beginning of time. Michael Jordan, Larry Bird was a famous trash talker. It's almost accepted, where in other sports, I'm not sure it would be as accepted, but if you have the upper hand, you get to talk shit. It's just kind of part of the sport. And what I got out of that from Caitlin Clark is she saw what Angel Reese was doing. And basically was like, I got to take this because I did the same thing. Really what she wanted to say was, let's run it back. Because on the school, in the schoolyard, a pickup game, basketball is one of those games, pickup games, 2-on-2, 1-on-1, 3-on-3, always trash talk. And there's always talk going on. You can't guard me, things like that. That's what Caitlin Clark was thinking. She's like, shit, we had a chance to win the national championship. She won the national championship. She's giving it to me. Let's run it back. Let's run this thing back and we'll beat you the next time. That's what's going on in a competitor basketball player head. And they understood that. And I just don't think people on the outside really understood it. People were trying to measure, well, Caitlin only did it for a few seconds. Angel did it for too long. It's trash talk, man. It's part of the game. Let's run it back.
Yeah, it's part of the game. I tell you what, I saw Keith Duncan blow a kiss to Scott Frost, and I'm like, how can you get too upset? That I'm sure Iowa fans weren't upset about that,
No.
and they weren't upset when, she's doing the John Cena, thing. Now,
I didn't know what that was. I didn't know that was a John Cena thing. I'm not a wrestling dude.
Yeah, me.
I used to be.
Yeah.
Mil Mascaris and Andre the Giant. That was my pro wrestling experience.
Yeah. I mean, I was back in the 80s when they kind of consolidated with Iron Sheik and what have you. No, here's kind of how I fall on it. During a game, I'm all about it, man. It's just the way it is, and as you said, in basketball, if you don't like it, tough, that's the way it works. And it's like that in football too. I mean, don't let.
It would be great to have these guys like Iowa playing Wisconsin or Nebraska. Have those guys mic'd up on the field during the game. That would be entertainment.
I got to see a lot of that firsthand with Iowa State winning last year. I was down by the tunnel, and when they got the trophy, man, they were all over the Iowa players talking shit. So I'm sure this year, nobody's forgotten about that. There's no damn, and I'm sure if Iowa loses at Wisconsin, playing jump around is going to be in their face, so there's all kinds of smack talk among rivals and among teams.
I think the irony is the people that were complaining the most are some of the people that talk the most smack on social media.
Yeah, right.
It's like, hey, get a mirror.
Yeah, right. The only thing that I was like a little uncomfortable with is that it's kind of over with. And, I guess and this is maybe the modest Iowan in me, is kind of like, when it's over, don't shove anybody's head in the shit.
Yeah.
It's over. It's like, talk your talk during the game, talk your shit, go for it. But it's over. It's like, congratulations, shake hands, go celebrate, and not kind of chase her around the court about the ring and but is it the big deal to me? No, it wasn't. I think it's been amplified to the point of, wow, I didn't think this was a big thing. But
good or bad for the sport?
I think it's good initially. I think it's getting to I think if it settles down, then it's fine. Then it's great. If it continues to linger, and of course, race has been brought up into it, and I've seen some really stupid ass takes on, I saw some people calling Caitlin Clark a Karen and all that bullshit. And I'm like, fuck you. That's where, to me, I get pissed off. It's not okay. Hey, Angel Reese can do whatever she wants. She won. Was I a little uncomfortable? Yeah, but oh well. Who cares?
A whole lot of ignorance.
Yeah.
Is what we saw the last week plus. A lot of ignorance.
And it is mutual on both sides. And it's just like, okay, and then of course it ends up like on SNL, It
was funny. I tweeted after Caitlin said, Angel Reese shouldn't get criticism. Yeah. I tweeted that out and said adult in the room. Yeah. And it was funny watching some of the people on social media think I was talking about LSU and Angel Reese, when actually I was talking about the people that were commenting on social media.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And they don't see it.
Right.
But I didn't see the SNL. I think Mike Halas may have put it on his Facebook or something. And I think I saw it in passing and didn't get a chance to watch it yet.
I was watching it live, and I have it on DVR too. So if you need to come over and watch it, you can. But it's like
got VHS or Betamax?
I do. I have not Betamax, but I do have a VHS. That I still have a shit ton of VHS tapes.
You got reel to reel? You got film on reel to reel?
Some of it has been transferred over to DVD. Okay. It's like my grandfather's, but it has been transferred to DVD now. But no, all
right. Sorry to interrupt. What was the SNL bit?
It's not on VHS. No, but like the first part was talking a little bit about the Bidens and Jill.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about talking about that part of it.
Yeah, and Michael Che's like, yeah, and Jill Biden was inviting her BFFs, the Iowa women's basketball team, and then they had I think it was Ego Wonum dress up as Angel Reese, and she's just kind of going like this and wearing a jersey and all that.
Is that good though? Because people are thinking, people that have no idea what they're even doing in that skit are like. And then they check it out. They try to get background of what they're doing, what the comedy is.
Well, exactly. I mean, those of us that know about it, it's like, oh shit, they're really going at it. And then other people are, it's perfect for the sport. I just think right now, whether it's if Angel Reese wants to take the next step, it's like, okay, go be magnanimous at the White House. You can joke around all you want. You can even talk a little smack, but let's not be in your face to the Bidens. That's really, for that side of the fence, that's not
how this works too, Scott. They'll get together, they'll be at the White House. Jill Biden will explain what her thought process was. Angel Reese can explain why she was offended by it, and you have a conversation.
Yeah.
And you work through it and get in a better understanding of each other. That's the way it should work.
Yeah, but does that ever happen in social media? No.
Not on social media. You're not going to solve any of the world's problems, including trash talking of women's basketball games on Twitter.
Well, and then you have, and then going back, the Haley Van Lith, who's now in the transfer portal. So I'd be really curious to see where she ends up. But, I think after Louisville took like an 8-0 lead, she's coming back screaming, "Get off my fucking court, bitch," and all this stuff. And then that's when, Caitlin Clark's doing this and, saying stuff like, "You're down 15 points, shut up," and it's like, that's
and these are kids that young adults who played together. They've been teammates before and they're still talking trash.
Yeah. So, you have those elements, and I think it's fine. It's perfect. And during the game, it's fine. It's perfect. And, after the game, I thought, again, it's kind of like, this is just me being uncomfortable a little bit. And it didn't matter if it could have been, if Caitlin would have done the same thing, I would have been the same way, which is after you win, be a gracious winner and not a sore loser or anything, and just, congratulations and move on. But hey, that's not me. And I'm clearly old enough to be certainly their fathers, if not their grandfathers. So
I think Caitlin Clark has just a good understanding of what her sports need, what her sport needs, and what helps her sport. And I think she sees the value in Angel Reese and what she brings to the sport, and Aaliyah Boston, and Van Lith, and go down the list of these personalities. These young women have personalities, and that's a great thing that they're getting to showcase that and how good they are at this game. And that's what it should be. So now women's basketball, don't let this fall flat.
Yeah.
Set up games next year. Get LSU and Iowa together in December, not too early in the season where they haven't had get a little chemistry going, because there's new players and things like that. Set something up. Get the sport out there. Put it on ABC. Let's go. Let's keep building this sport.
I put out an idea that I think would, that I don't know about early in the year, because it gets overshadowed by college football.
That's true.
And the NFL, and if it's on a Saturday in December, you got NFL games or whatever. But what I'd like to see is, like, let's say the weekend between the NFC and AFC championships and the Super Bowl, that like
what's that, end of January, beginning of February?
Yeah, like first or second week. It'd be like the first weekend in February.
Okay.
That you have like an 8 teams, 4 games, celebration of C. Vivian Stringer at Madison Square Garden.
That's a good idea.
Because C. Viv, had to retire basically throughout the pandemic. She has been a giant in the sport that really hasn't gotten her due, I think, at a large scale. Obviously took Iowa to the Final Four, 1,000 career wins or whatever. I think if you had like a celebration of C. Vivian Stringer, have it the Stringer shootout or something like that at Madison Square Garden, 4 games, include Iowa, UConn.
Definitely UConn, because the following back there, they would bring a lot of people to the Garden.
Absolutely, and being nearby there.
Yep.
LSU, maybe South Carolina, maybe Indiana, Rutgers for sure, Tennessee. And if you have 4 games, it's a neutral site, so then it could go on an ESPN family of networks and ABC, because it's not on the Big Ten purview.
Yeah.
But if you have that, in that vein, in that window, and you have a Caitlin Clark and an Angel Reese, and maybe you schedule it. It could be Iowa versus UConn or Iowa versus LSU, one way or the other. You want that matchup, and boom, you've got something there. And the personalities in women's basketball are so much greater than they are in college men's basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, you just look at the two national players of the year. I mean, no offense to Zach Edey. He was terrific for Purdue, but do we know him? Do we, really. Is he said anything, done anything other than being 7'4" or whatever, and scored a lot of points for a team that got, beat not only by a 16 seed, but a team that shouldn't even have been in there because its champion couldn't compete, Merrimack. So they throw Fairleigh Dickinson in there. Who's on the All-American team that we look at and go, yeah, the personalities on the women's team, women's side, as you've seen with Caitlin Clark and Haley Van Lith and the Cavender twins, from Miami, yep. And Angel Reese and Aaliyah Boston. I mean, these are known players and systems. Rob, in a different way, it reminds me a lot of the 90s NBA, where you had teams and you had systems and you had styles and you had personalities. Yes, it's on a much smaller scale, but it's, when you have Jordan and the Bulls, that's basically, Clark, and you got Angel Reese and LSU. That's like the bad boys in Detroit. And, and you've got, you just start making these kind of comparisons, and,
it's kind of a building too, right? Yeah. You think about Sabrina Ionescu,
yeah,
and even back to like Lisa Leslie. I mean, women's basketball has had some really excellent personalities, and I think now we talk about the NIL window and things like that, Scott, whereas the men, they're still the top players are one and done for the most part. The women, they can benefit from staying at the college, for 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it may be, 5 years now with some of the COVID. You can kind of build your brand, right? And build your program's brand by sticking around and making more money than you will in the WNBA. Most of the WNBA players have to play overseas during the off season.
Right.
You could stay in college and make more than what they're making. It's a great opportunity right now for women's college basketball to build this brand and build the brand around the star players.
Right. No question. And that's huge. As you said, I mean, it's like people around here from the 80s, men's basketball in the Big Ten, you knew who was on every team. Right. They were there 4 years, and some of them still are, which is why there's respect / animosity, and it works both ways for some of the players. Probably what Indiana and Wisconsin and Northwestern fans felt about Jordan Bohannon and Connor McCaffrey, and and you look at the same way with some of the others, but those aren't the All-Americans that are sticking around like they are in women's basketball. And as you said, they can build their NIL brands now. They also, so you can, Caitlin Clark probably will make more money NIL wise at Iowa than what she would in the WNBA. On top of that, when you start talking about institutions, college basketball is bigger and greater than that of the WNBA right now. It's, the institution, the University of Iowa has a much more loyal following than the Minnesota Lynx, or the LA Sparks, or New York Liberty. So if you're even a marketer, wow, you've got a bigger following for her. If you want to have the Air logos, which they need to freaking do for Caitlin Clark at the University of Iowa, and she's going to get all kinds of stuff there. So I think the sport has a real opportunity here, and Iowa has a real opportunity, as we saw. I wasn't working last week, but I did read through the emails and saw that they paused ticket sales. I mean, Rob, we might have a higher attendance for the women next year than the men in Iowa. In fact, right now it appears to be the case. And they set the Big Ten record this year. for highest average attendance, significantly higher than what it was before. And then on the road, as I've said quite a few times, that Iowa's average on the road is 3,600 people more. In a lot of cases, it was like 8,000 more. That's the Caitlin Clark effect.
Yeah, no doubt. And the NBA should pay attention too, because as women's college basketball becomes bigger, and it should, if they do it right now, with the attention they were able to draw this season, and the star players continue to build their brands in college, then more people will follow them when they get to the WNBA. Then you can grow the WNBA. That's kind of how it can work if they do it the right way. And we've seen it before with like the U.S., when they had, the gold medal teams in the U.S. for USA women's basketball. But this is different. This is, that college loyalty that you can follow into the pros. We see it a little bit this year with Keegan Murray with the Sacramento Kings, more Iowa fans. You need to kind of get that network moving for college women's basketball into the WNBA and hopefully grow that a little bit more. So there's, that is something that get that balance towards, hopefully they stay in college for 3 years, but then get that balance that they can get that bump when they get to the pros as well.
Right. And they don't really have the opportunity to leave early, if I recall.
It's 3, right? Is it 3 or?
It's at least 3. I mean, so it's not like that you can be one and done, and that wouldn't matter. I wouldn't recommend
that. Could change too. I could see somebody challenging that, but that's a conversation for another day.
Right. Well, for the money that they would make in the WNBA, I don't know that would be worth it at this point. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, and you look on the horizon when Caitlin goes to the WNBA, whether it's after 1 more year at Iowa or 2 more years at Iowa. The Minnesota Lynx should have a game in Des Moines, or let alone Iowa City, but Des Moines would make more sense for a lot of reasons. But, you really should capitalize on these moments and have these types of games and these types of places. And I'm sure they'll try to, whether it's gerrymander the draft or whatever, to ensure that when Caitlin Clark gets up there that she's playing. But tonight's the draft for the WNBA.
Yeah.
And, Monica Zanano will be drafted probably in the 2nd round. So, I
more exposure, more good publicity, more, attention for your school and your brand.
Exactly. So this is really a seminal moment. This is a moment where everything is pointed towards it, because it wasn't that long ago, and we both remember it, where they had curtains at women's games, and sitting there on Good Call on with Brent Balvin on, he'd be like, what's it going to take to get you guys there? That sort of thing. Well, it's entertainment now. It's not, there's a loyalty factor that colleges rely on to, businesses. Okay, I'll buy the 4 tickets and support the college, but then those businesses are giving away those tickets, 2/3 of the games, or they're just sitting blank. Not anymore. I mean, as we saw, it's this year, it was pretty incredible already, and it's going to be nothing short of spectacular come next winter.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, Iowa's really in a good spot in terms of being able to utilize the transfer portal. I know there are no scholarships available, and I saw some bickering on Twitter today about running kids off. Here's where I am on that. Whether it's, Kirk Ferentz and his staff, or Fran McCaffrey and his staff, or Lisa Bluter, or Tom Brands, or Rick Heller, or Joey Woody, or anybody, just be honest with your athletes. And I think let them make a decision. If they want to stay knowing they're probably not going to play, I'm not one for running kids off in that, because you made a commitment to them, bringing them in here to develop them. And I know it's a business, and I know it's you have to win. That's the bottom line, all that stuff, but it is still college athletics. And for me, I'm not one to say run people off. But if you bring player X into your office and say, listen, I don't see a path to playing time for you right now, something could happen. where there's an injury or we lose somebody where you could get a path to playing time, just be honest. And then if the kid wants to move on, and if you look at Iowa's roster right now, the women's basketball team, that is, there are a lot of kids that did not see any playing time this year. Is there a path to playing time for them next year or the year after? Are they willing to wait for that? To me, it will sort itself out.
Sure. And I think I mean, we've seen it before with the football team where, if you bring in back in the old days, a junior college kid, or, sometimes there was a transfer where you'd have, all right, you're at 86, and, but organically things work themselves out. And I could totally see that with the women's basketball team. The Ava Jones situation is interesting. It's a great story. You really are rooting for her to get her life back, because that was such a horrific situation.
Medical scholarships count against the count, right?
No.
Oh, they don't. Okay.
No.
So her scholarship next year does not count against the.
Well, it does now until once they make her a medical, she can never play at that school again.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's a tough decision then.
Yeah. So that's why, like with Justin Britt,
right.
That he's and on the football side, he's a medical now. So he'd have to leave in order to play again, and that's why he's entered the portal.
Yeah,
and that's the case just about everywhere. And so they've got to navigate that one carefully, I think. But there are other players too, as you said. I mean, when they're playing largely 8 or 9.
Yeah, they tightened it up even more in the tournament. I mean, they reduced Molly Davis's minutes at times. She took a shot in the head too. That probably didn't help. But
right.
She really tightened the rotation up as they got in until they got in foul trouble in the championship game, and she had no choice.
Yeah, and they've got Kylie Feuerbach coming back after an ACL, and she played a lot of minutes the year before. She's a really good player. She and Gabby Marshall are comparable in their abilities, I suppose. Sydney Ottfelder is going to play probably more. She's Kate Martin's backup. I would anticipate Hannah Stolke is going to take over for McKenna Warnock. She's a different kind of player. She's certainly not the shooter, but she's got more speed and can really run the floor. So she's more of a typical 4, not like a stretch 4 like Iowa likes to play. And but the number 5 is the biggest question mark of all. I mean, how do you replace Zanano? She, was very, very good, and had to replace the irreplaceable Megan Gustafson, and did so with, I would say really similarly to what Philip Rebracha did replacing Luka Garza. You're just not going to replace that type of player, but you can go in and play your game and do well. And, maybe even Zanano was better than, Rebracha did a great job, I thought. And I think Zanano was even better than that. So that's the portal spot that they really need to get. They need to get a tall, athletic 5, and they're going to have to figure something out. And I would go get one. And then, as you said, kind of handle the portal situation organically, and forcing kids out. I don't like that. I don't like that for any sport, let alone women's basketball. But there will come a time when you're going to have to kind of lean in that direction and just make it so obvious to a player or 2 players that, listen, we've got a rotation set now at 10, and you're probably about 14.
And the one good thing, Scott, is kids know.
Yeah.
They know where they stand in the pecking order. They're at practice every day. Some have maybe unrealistic views of things. There's some that, I'm just better than everybody else, even though they're not. But for the most part, things get settled in practice, and where you stand on the depth chart, for lack of a better term. And I don't know, is Addie O'Grady ready to take that next step? Can she be, Monica Light and then continually get better like Monica did? Is that good enough with everything else you have around? So you don't, maybe that offense comes more from Stolke or somebody else, where you're not getting as much from the 5, but you're getting it from other positions. And it seems like Lauren Betts is the one that everybody is kind of pining for in the
Yeah.
Iowa fan base. The kid that's leaving Stanford was the number one recruit. She
Yeah.
played 1 year at Stanford, number one player in the country, I believe, at least number one post. So that's the one I'm being asked about. I don't have any information on her. I would think, though, as we said earlier, hey, I'm a post player and I'm looking for a place to go where I know somebody can get me the ball where I can score.
Right.
I think I was in pretty good shape there.
Yeah. If you're, I mean, Iowa women's basketball is kind of like Iowa wrestling when it comes to recruiting now. I mean, it's like you saw what she did. You saw what Megan Gustafson did. You see who we have at guard. And it's not like, some people want to say, oh, she's just a ball hog. Oh, yeah, ball hogs lead the country in assists. Dumbass, And so, they see who they got. They know they got Patrick Mahomes out there directing traffic and the passes. The only thing I would say is, can you handle that smoke? I mean, because she could sling it. Oh my God, is she good? As great of a shooter as she is, but as a distributor, she has no peer. I've never seen anything like it, men's or women's. And the one thing with the post is Zanana was great when you got it to her kind of waist up, but getting her down was, I thought Caitlin had a lot of turnovers that weren't necessarily her fault. There were a lot that were, because she slings it, but she's a gunslinger. She's Brett Favre. but at the same time, I think if you have a little bit more athletic post, and certainly Betts is in that category, that I think, you could make that work. But then I would also love to see another step taken by Addie O'Grady. At times I was kind of like, oh boy, this might be a challenge. And but in the tournament, she played great. So I don't know that she's Zanano, but I think she's certainly capable of being a quality backup, playing a lot of minutes. And if you can have kind of a 1-2 combo in that position, especially because you're losing McKenna Warnock, who's a really good stretch four, I think you're in really good shape.
We will see how things shake out this offseason. I would anticipate some movement on the Iowa women's basketball roster. It's just the way it is right now with the transfer portal, and trying to roster management is just a year-round venture these days for all sports. So yeah. I would be surprised if the women's basketball team came back with everybody that's on the roster now, but you never know. We'll see. Obviously it's an attractive landing spot, and we'll talk about that more moving forward. We're going to take a break now, and then we will come back and talk some football and men's basketball and Big Ten commissioner update from Scott and all that good stuff. Want to let folks know that support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. We'll take a brief break here hear from a couple of our sponsors, and Scott and I will be back on the other side. All right, reloaded the coffee, good to go here. Want to let folks know as well, I know I've mentioned this place to Scott, one of our sponsors, Ariza Asian Cuisine, over on the corner. It's in the corner, around the corner of Highway 6, Highway 1 in Iowa City. They're running a special now, Scott. If they mention our podcast, if they mention Hawk Fanatic Podcast, Hawkeye Hotspot Podcast, any of our podcasts, you go in there, 10% off. 10% off your order right off the top. All you got to do is mention our podcast.
I'm definitely going there one of these days. I'm in North Liberty, so I go to a place really next door, but now that I know about this. I'm I'm a cheapskate, so I'm definitely all over this.
Good food. My family's had it once, and we will go back as well. And again, folks, just mention our podcast, Ariza Asian Cuisine, excellent food, 10% off your order, thanks to the Hawk Fanatic podcast. Scott, let's go to do some Iowa football here. They got a commitment last week from a young man with a familiar last name who told me he's going to Iowa because Iowa fits him, not because Jack went there. His name is Drew Campbell, and he does not want to be Jack's. I've interviewed him a few times, and he's made it pretty crystal clear that he wants to be his own dude.
Mm-hmm. Don't blame him. And Jack is all about that too. I did catch, when I was in the airport, my first air experience last week was 26 straight hours at either airports or airplanes. So, yeah, it was fun. But I saw Jack was on Good Morning Football on NFL Network, so I watched the clip and talked about his brother picking Iowa, and he just wants him to be his own man. And Jack's always been that way. So good for Drew. Rob, do you see him more as a defensive end?
Yeah, different type of player than Jack. Jack kind of grew into being a middle linebacker at Iowa, was a little thinner when he came in and just kind of built his way into that position. I think Drew's already more physically developed than Jack was when he was coming out of Cedar Falls. And from what I've watched and their highlights, granted, people are going to put their best stuff on those highlight tapes, so you're seeing the best. But he's got a really good motor, nice combination of size, speed. I think once he gets to Iowa and, Kelvin Bell and Jay Neiman start to teach him the position, I could also see him eventually being a guy that could swing inside or out on the defensive line, depending on how his body physically develops. But I really like him. He's got a motor. He comes at you nonstop. Kind of what you would think of if you're saying, I wonder what Jack Campbell's little brother's like. He's a guy that's going to come at you nonstop.
Yes. Yeah, nobody's ever said that Jack took the long way around in a football game or a football field. No. Well, it's interesting because Jack had those opportunities to move to defensive end. And he's told me before that those conversations were made above him, that he really wasn't involved in them, but that was a focus more so in 2019, 2020, especially in 2020, before COVID really smoked everything. And in talking to Seth Wallace about it, he was very reluctant. He really fought against it because he's like, if I lose him to defensive end, you lose him forever. He's going to be there forever. And I still felt like he'd be the linebacker that he was. And, there was some discussion because you had Dylan Doyle at the time, who was really good. And whether or not that, do they need two backers like that? And he also had Seth Benson and stuff. Yeah. So it was like, Jack's long frame, he's 6'5", he's 250, but if you build him like an edge rusher, he's 270. And, so, luckily they kept him at linebacker, and that made a lot of sense. But I heard Drew was more of a DN type anyway. And I think it's a great move, because he fits in. He saw for 4 years what it meant to be there. And I think, I know Matt Campbell had a lot of things, had a lot of impact on Jack on whether or not he was going to go there. Minnesota was not part of the equation. It was really an Iowa State thing. And so I'm sure he had to think that over, but, good move for Iowa, good move for Drew Campbell. He'll be I would not be surprised to see him taking some rotational snaps pretty early in his career, even with a stacked defensive line like Iowa has.
Good class this year in 24 in-state, Scott, and Iowa's doing very well. Identified a lot of these kids early. A lot of these names the listeners will know. Cody Fox, offensive lineman from East Buchanan. Derek Weiskopf, just a tremendous athlete from Williamsburg. Cam Buffington, Drew Campbell, and Preston Reese. That's what, 7 commits and 5 are in-state kids in this group. And that, James Reeser from, is it Reeser?
Yeah, I think that's the case, or Racer. I don't know. I'll have to.
Reeser. Yeah, we're going to have to see when we write. For you guys listening, when we write, we don't have to worry about pronunciations. We just have to spell it right. It's harder now that we do more vocal things, that I'm not as apt to ask a kid how to pronounce his name, but I need to be better at that because I need to say the names. And as Josh Janowski is an offensive lineman from Lincoln Way East in Frankfort, Illinois. So Iowa's up to 7 right now. If you go by 247, overall 16th ranked class in the country so far, Scott. Good start.
Yeah, it's a great start. And they really, they kind of worked in tandem, 23 and 24 classes. And they needed that in state because last year they got beat. They lost. Iowa State beat them. And, and the other schools did too, but it was a picked over unit. But when you're losing Central Iowa the way that they were losing Central Iowa, and Iowa State made that a priority. I wrote about that with, Derek Hoodger, their director of recruiting, and why they make Central Iowa a priority. You're going to have to win some of these matchups. Iowa used to be able to kind of say, these are the kids we want, and we'll get, and for the most part, outside of Michigan coming in for a receiver like Amara Darbo or Adrian Arrington, they pretty much got who they wanted. And Iowa State took whatever was kind of in their purview, and maybe they battle over one kid a year. Not anymore. They're toe to toe. And so I think bouncing back, getting guys, Drew Campbell being among them, but Weiskopf and Reese and Cam Buffington. The one thing I just wonder is they all look like really good athletes. It's a matter of trying to find the right spot for them all. And hopefully for Iowa, it's not all the same spot. They're not all safety / linebacker types. And they've got to, figure out, is Cam Buffington, is he a linebacker and only a linebacker? Derek Weiskopf, is he?
It goes back to the Jack Campbell, Dylan Doyle thing, right? Yeah, where you're like, okay, where do these pieces fit in the puzzle? Yeah. But I like the idea, and I know you agree with this. You get really good athletes. Yeah. Like Norm Parker used to say, get them on the bus and then you'll find the seat.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the way it is. It's like, make sure that you get them so they're not hitting against you. You'd hate to say, well, we've got Cam Buffington from Winfield Mount Union. So, Derek Weiskopf, you want to go to Iowa State, go ahead. And then, and then it's like Jake Knott and, those guys and AJ Klein.
Yeah.
But so I think you're okay with that. But no,
you're definitely going to need some wide receivers in this group, Scott.
They need some wide receivers, period, right now.
Yeah, well, they're going to need the transfer portal here in a few weeks, and then, but they need to get some guys in this 24 class.
It's a perpetual problem, and it's like we kind of laughingly would talk about it, the airbag thing from 10 years ago. Receivers worse.
This is not good.
To be where they are now, and nobody blames Brody Brecht for what happened. No. You'd be an idiot if you are. And there was one person who was an idiot, like after I wrote the story.
I'm sure there was more than one.
Yeah, but there was one who was like, football, look at what Kyler Murray did. I'm like, you dumbass. That's the first overall pick, and he's a quarterback. But but when you look, he's an 8-figure guy. But it really leaves this team shorthanded. And you think about, not that long ago, we were talking up that class with him and Keegan Johnson and Arlen Bruce, and wow, that's a really good crew. And what a great job, that Cope did. You bring him in, and gone, all wiped out. And then when you have Seth Anderson hurt and soft tissue injury and stuff, it's like, holy cow. If I'm one of the backup defensive backs, I know we talked about it before, man, I think strongly about switching positions, because this is your chance. If you're AJ Lawson, for instance, or, somebody like that, where you have it, now is your chance, man. If you got it, it's because, having Nico is great. But he's right now they're, and Deontay Vines, but that's it.
Yeah.
You do not want to be in the same situation you were last year, and certainly your offensive coordinator will not want to be in that, because you might be winning 17-13, and that's not going to keep you employed.
Yeah, I wonder about the kids coming in June too, Scott. You got Jarrett Bowie, Dayton Howard, and then of course Alex Moda from up in Marion. The opportunity's there for these kids, depending on what Iowa does in the transfer portal. Even if Iowa does something in the transfer portal, you have to figure they're going to have to give these true freshmen a long look.
Yeah, for sure. And basically, Jacob Bostic, he isn't.
Yeah. Well, I saw him at the when they let us in for practice. He's on a scooter.
Yeah. And so you could almost forget about him until at least August, and that's not.
And Dejon Parker had his foot in a contraption.
Yeah.
Which it's just like, God, can we have nice things?
Yeah, right. Especially on that side of the ball. God. But yeah, I think that right now they're going to have to hit the portal in a couple of weeks at receiver. I just don't know
how. What do you think it's going to be like in May? Is it going to be like just the Wild West when this thing opens up and with NIL money? And because now everybody's coming out of spring and they know what they need after seeing what they have in the spring. I just wonder how crazy it's going to be and how hard it's going to be for Iowa to compete.
Good question. Good question. I just don't know. And, here's the thing. I mean, how many players decided to go ahead and stick with their team through the spring semester? And, some of the elite ones, let's say you're at a MAC school and you felt like, wow, I had a really good year. And then you start looking around and let's say you're at a MAC school, hell, even a Missouri Valley school. And you're thinking, yeah, I could go and be at this school, school, or I look over at Iowa and I'm thinking, shit, I could go over there and play right away in the Big Ten.
Here's my addition for the transfer portal. You have the guys that are going in the transfer, and then you have help wanted from the colleges. The college they have their own section of the transfer portal, the window that says what Iowa team needs: receiver, offensive line, whatever, and then the recruits that are in there can say, okay, these are the schools that are looking for my position.
Yeah. So you think they should have it like an advertisement?
Yeah. Like a classified ad. Help wanted. Wide receiver.
Classified ad. Oh, that would be great. Bring those back.
Big bold letters with the capitalized help wanted receiver.
Make classified ads great again. We're back in the 90s. Yeah, but if nothing else, Iowa should do that on social media. Yeah. But because again, what you figure looking at this unit is Nico, he's your here's your North Star, and Deontay Vines. I thought he played well last year.
He's what you say flashed.
Yeah,
but he's going to have to show it consistently.
Yeah, and and at some point, you're looking at it going, well, yeah, he did a nice job. Is he more than that? We don't know. I mean, and then Seth Anderson, you'd expect him to be competitive. But he's not healthy now. That's really another thing. And Jacob Bostic has never been healthy throughout that. You've got newcomers, but they're not like 5 stars. You can't just say, oh yeah, this kid's going to walk in and be a starter. Or, I mean, the 2 guys that really came in and looked like they could compete right away were a long way from freaking competing. And that was Brandon Smith, who, by the way, caught a touchdown pass in the XFL yesterday.
Nice. Congrats.
For the DC Defenders. And Amir Smith-Marset. And he was very inconsistent. He had 2 touchdowns against Iowa State, and he had no other touchdowns the rest of the season. So, so bringing in, whether it's Alex, who I think is pretty refined for that as an athlete, but not necessarily as a receiver, or the others, Jarrett Bowie or Dayton Howard, you just don't know what you're going to get right away. And so I think if they could get anything, from the portal, that's going to be, a rotational piece I think that's where they need to go. But because really the unfortunate part is that if they continue to get hamstrung there, you're not going to see the progress that might be there with a new quarterback who I expect to be much better, and possibly with the offensive line, even though that they're dealing with their own injuries now too, with Parker and Mason Richmond and stuff. But other than that, then you look at the other side of the ball and I'm like, holy shit, this unit is going to be, they're going to be mauling people, man. It's going to be fun to watch if you like defensive football. Iowa's right there.
So same movie we saw last year. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Hopefully the offense take some strides forward. But you're right. I think Bowie, Howard, and Moda are all what you would call raw.
Yeah.
At that, but you never know. You get a kid in and things click quickly, and you just maybe reduce the playbook a little bit and just get them in there so they're a threat. Maybe Moda can be that guy. Maybe Bowie or Howard can be that guy. I mean, I'll date myself here, but I remember when Clinton Solomon came in here, as he was a high school quarterback in Texas. He came here. We weren't expecting anything from him. He came in his first year and boom, turned heads at receiver his first season here. And that's a long time ago, 20 years ago or whatever it is. But it can happen. You kind of need you need some of these guys to step forward, Scott, in addition to hopefully getting one. To me, I know it's dangerous, but if I'm investing in the transfer portal, I get a go-to guy instead of maybe getting two okay guys. I go for that go-to guy and say, hey, you're the guy. You're our outside guy this year. Cade's here. We need an outside guy. You're it. Here's the money. Here's the bag. Come to Iowa City.
Yeah, absolutely. No question. I think you do that in the worst way. Now, the question's going to be, Rob, and we both know this, is, can the collective afford a good receiver, or are you going to get into Sophie's choice of a good receiver or a center on the basketball team? And that's going to be really interesting, because I don't know how that's going to play out,
especially when you've already invested in football in December and now basketball is like, hey, where's ours?
Yeah, exactly. And, and which way do you go? I mean, I guess that's why they make the bucks and they collect the bucks. And, because I saw somebody either on Twitter or message boards say that he donated to Swarm, but he wasn't asked where he wanted that money to go. It was just to the general collective. And I'm wondering if they get to that point, but then, is everybody going to say, I want all our money to go? Everybody's going to put it in football, and then you don't leave any for women's and men's basketball. So I don't know what the best way to function would be. Well, I think I think you've got to let people, there should be different avenues and veins in that. And
yeah, I agree.
Which is, hey, I'm got a subscription to, the Swarm, and I'm paying $200 a year or whatever. That should be a general fund,
right,
and dispersed, because you're not even talking about getting guys and players. You're talking about paying the ones who are going around and doing the jobs you need them to do, going to school.
Yeah, those smaller donations, I think you just put in the pot.
Yeah, right. But then if, hey, I want to write a 6-figure check to go get some players, and I care about football and I don't give a shit about basketball, then I think my 6 figures should go towards football, or vice versa. Or if you're, you're a women's basketball supporter, hey, I want to make sure we go get that post.
This is when I wish that the Iowa athletic department was more involved with the collective, so they could work hand in hand on this stuff. I think it would make it easier.
Right. And I think, I'm sure the coaches are heavily involved.
Yes.
So,
and I guess that's probably the best way to do it too, is to go directly. But I think somebody in the overall athletic department needs to kind of manage everything, so you don't have one coach saying, hey, we really need this, at the expense of another coach. It's complicated, but we're still in the infancy really of this whole thing.
Right. And again, then it comes down to, if there's 100K, let's say, out there, and does it all go to men's basketball? Does football say, sorry, you're just going to have to go, through the school unit, you've already had your money? Or, is it, hey, football pays the bills. Football needs it more than basketball. That's where I'm fascinated to see how this turns out, not only just in Iowa, and we're watching Iowa very closely, but all schools, frankly, because I just think that it's,
there's so much money available too when you think
Yeah.
about the media rights and donations and all that stuff. You just wish they could figure it out.
Mhm. Without having any leadership whatsoever at the NCAA level, it's really difficult. And they fucked themselves a long time ago. And now there's another
Get sued again.
Yeah. And it's just going to continue to happen. And had they had this all sorted out 10 years ago, had Mark Emmert been able to do anything, when Shabazz Napier is complaining about going hungry and Kane Coulter is trying to form unions and things like that.
How is that not a warning sign for these people?
They don't care, they don't have to answer to a board of directors and ensure their shareholders have to get paid. And there's an owner who wants to get paid. I mean, you make it, you spend it. And they don't think, and it's like, oh, well, this is the student athlete experience and blah, blah, blah. And all this
scholarship,
hoity toity bullshit. And it's like, guys, this isn't, I remember sounding those alarm bells 10 years ago going, this is changing. You better figure it out or it's going to be gone. And then they get blown out on the most partisan, polarized Supreme Court in the nation's history, 9-0. Okay, you're dead. And I think right now, it's time to completely revise everything and probably let football go its separate way and have its own governance structure and try to pick up the pieces with the NCAA and the maybe the other sports, maybe through academic components, but it's a dead institution, and Charlie Baker is going to try his best, I think, but it's dead in the water.
You mentioned before we started recording, we'll fold this in when we're talking about suits. And I mean, not lawsuits. I mean, like suits that you wear. Big Ten commissioner, still an opening there, Scott. Are we going to get a new name here soon?
I think we might be getting close, Rob. I mean, I know that there's been some talk and talking to some people around it that they were really wanting it done in sometime in April, which is now. I mean, we're talking 3 months since Kevin Warren announced he was, going to go to the Chicago Bears. And I know he's been at the NFL meetings and stuff. So it's reached that uncomfortable point. I think it's kind of like we've all experienced it where, you give your 2 or even 3 weeks notice. And then all of a sudden you're just kind of like, everybody's talking about moving forward or what you're going to do next month. And you're like, I'm ready to.
Yep, I'm outie.
Yeah, I'm worried about that. And I think that's kind of where they are with the Big Ten, because they still need to finalize some of even though the media rights have been agreed upon, there's still some intricacies involved. And of course, the meetings for the CFP so largely what they want from a commissioner, and that I've been kind of told, is they want somebody more college centered. The last 3 main hires, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the Pac-12 have all been kind of outside the purview of college sports. And it's been, it's up and down at best. So I think they want somebody who's able to communicate with student athletes in a way and kind of understand the inner workings of college to collegiate sports. So I think it wouldn't be surprising to me if by the end of the month we have a new commissioner in the Big Ten and ready to go.
And what the hell's going on with football scheduling?
Yeah, we got another month plus before that thing happens. So
we're not going to know about the 24 and beyond for a while, kind of what the structure is going to be.
Yeah, that's getting close. Nicole and I wrote that a couple of weeks ago and before I went on vacation. And that is that there are 3 options that they've centered on. One is the 366.
Mhm.
Everybody gets 3. We've talked about that. Another one is 2 protected, and then you cycle through everybody like over a 4-year period. You'd play 2 teams 3 times, and then everybody else twice. And then the other one is more of a flex plan, which they kind of like, the coaches hate, which is certain teams will have more protected rivalries than others. So like Iowa might have 3 protected rivals. Maryland and Rutgers might have 1. USC and UCLA might have 1, and just kind of have this unbalanced scheduling pattern, I guess. And I think that one probably makes as much sense as anything. I've always been an advocate of the 366, and then you just start switching up on some of these after you've reached the 4th year. But I don't know. I mean, there are rivalries that Iowa holds dear, and then Michigan has 2, and other teams don't
I think the problem with all this, Scott, is you're going to piss some people off. There's no way you can't piss some people off, and they're trying to piss off the fewest amount of people possible.
Right.
That's my take.
Well, yeah, exactly. And like the other details that it's easy to talk about. Well, Iowa has 3 rivals, and Illinois has 2, and whatever. The couple things that they're working through with any of these methods are, number one, only 1 West Coast trip per year for each team.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
So you don't want to have Nebraska, for instance, playing at USC and at UCLA in the same year.
How about like Nebraska going to USC and Rutgers? Because now you're going both ways. So you got to, I wonder. I think that's a great point. I think travel has got to be a big part of this, Scott.
Yeah, it's big in football, and it's massive in the other sports.
Yeah,
the other sports is just, they've got a long way to go. The other part is, and this is kind of the intricacies of scheduling, that they want to ensure that in no case ever will there be 3 9-0 teams. Now, so because there's gonna, so they got to interwork and weave the schedule, so you never have that chance of 3 9-0 teams. So how do you do that? Well, you just got to check it all the time, I suppose. And it's for instance, you think about a given year, what if it's Ohio State, Iowa, and USC, and none of the 3 play each other, and they're all 9-0? That's
nightmare scenario for the Big Ten.
They do not want that to happen under any circumstance. And, and ultimately with a 12-team playoff, it's not going to matter that much, but it does matter as far as seeding, who gets home games, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So, because you get 2 teams playing in the championship game, the winner is going to be get a bye, but what about the 3rd team that doesn't quite get in there? So that they're thinking about those types of things, and there's a lot, but I would say that there'll probably be a commissioner by the end of the month, and that commissioner will have his or her voice into the discussion. It'll probably be more in the neighborhood of catching up and, okay, that sounds good, and that's it. But but yeah, most of the people are pretty sworn to secrecy on this topic.
We will keep an eye on that. We'll look forward to finding out who the new leader of the Big Ten will be. Scott and I will be taking a little break here to hear from some sponsors, and we'll come back and wrap up with a little Iowa men's basketball talk and check in on the Iowa baseball team as well. Hang in there. We'll be right back. And we are back. And yes, I am still drinking coffee at 10:40 a.m. It may be an all-day affair of me drinking coffee after spending 3 days with screaming kids in a. So it was at McCormick, Scott, which you're familiar with because we've done Big Ten football media days there. I never realized how enormous that place was. Like we would come out of the hotel and go down the elevators, and you take pretty much a straight hallway to the, the ballrooms or the meeting rooms where we would have the interviews with Big Ten players and coaches. There's stairs there that go up to this other section of this place, and it's just enormous. And there were 150 volleyball courts they fit into this thing.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was nonstop from 8 a.m. to like 10 o'clock at night, just screaming. So that is why I'm drinking a lot of coffee, and I'm recovering in a different way than coming back from Japan. I'm coming back from Chicago, but hours upon hours of watching club volleyball and screaming parents and screaming kids. And a good time was had by all.
Oh man, I tell you what, I'm glad I don't have to do that. God bless all of you parents of traveling sports teams, whether it's the volleyball, basketball, this baseball, softball.
It's a lot different than we were kids when there'd be like CYO leagues or, intramurals, things like that. Those are gone.
Yeah. I can't. I have a lot of friends who, do the baseball thing, travel teams and stuff. And that's just something that I never would have enjoyed, which is sitting on, let's go travel 4 hours and spend our entire weekend watching 5 baseball games over 2 days. It was just like, my complexion couldn't handle that much sun, and I'm not a big fan of 90 degrees anyway. So it's thank God I didn't have to worry about that.
Dino helped us out here. I'm going to take your word for this, Dino. He says, Scott, that anyone who gives $1,000 or more to the collective can earmark the money to where they want it to go. So that's the cutoff.
Thanks, Dino. That's great to know. I appreciate that. That's yep. So,
and that's a decent number. I mean, you give $1,000, you should be able to say where you want it to go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, I would say the majority of Iowa fans are supporters of both sports, but it's not unanimous. I mean, and there are people who, again, they like football but love basketball, or vice versa. And there should be some sort of opportunity there. And, now with Chris Murray officially announcing he's going to the pros, and
a surprise to no one who was paying attention.
Although it's funny reading some of the message boards that, he's not ready. He's not ready. He's not good enough. He should benefit from another year.
Yes. All the NBA general managers on the message boards and Twitter saying what Chris Murray should do, even though he's pretty much projected in every mock I've seen to be a middle first round pick. So that's guaranteed money. He'd be a fool to come back.
Well, exactly. There was the one that cracked me up, and I think this was on Kakert's board. Somebody said he's a third round pick. They haven't had the third round in the NBA in like 30 years, or more.
Now that would be a trick. If he ended up being a third round pick, he should play the lottery or something, because that's the odds of that happening aren't good when there's no third round.
No, there's no third round. So the NBA, they would be very disappointed to see a lot of the NBA selections, because when you look at these players who are, I remember there was a Michigan State Post player, and I can't remember his name now for the life of me. This is 6, 7, 8 years ago, because the time's blending away, but he never really even started, and he was a first round pick, and it was just, it's potential. It's what you think. And when you look at Keegan this year, who set the NBA record for most threes, now that, by a rookie, and who would have guessed that? Not me.
No.
They're looking at Chris and saying he can do that, or close to it. And he can, he's a year off. So for Joe Iowa fan to think, he's not good enough. Well, how much NBA have you watched? Well, I don't watch it until maybe the final. Well, okay. Then you don't know. And you don't know how good he could be if he's put in a specific system that emphasizes his skill set, and he has players around him who are just as good or better than he is. So that's really that infuriates me. I heard the same thing with every football player who leaves early, Lucas Van Ness.
Yep.
Well, it is true with Lucas Van Ness. He probably could have improved a lot had he come back to Iowa for one more year, but he's going to improve a lot in the NFL and get paid for it.
Exactly.
And not have to go to those high school or the middle schools and read to students. So,
and not have another year of college of wear and tear on his body.
Exactly. He's going to be top 10, top 12, top 15 pick. And same thing with Chris Murray, come on, you read the projections. They're not wrong. And then put, really what they're mad about is Iowa didn't have a lot of success this year. And Chris sometimes wasn't there the way you'd want him to be, but the team wasn't there either. It wasn't all on him. They got to help him out too. He can't just be a one-man show. Otherwise he'd be the best player in the country, which Iowa has had recently.
Mm-hmm. No question. And we touched on this a little bit in the previous segment, Scott, when we were talking about the football and NIL and transfer portal. This is obviously a big offseason for Iowa men's basketball. And what can it do in the transfer portal? We had I wrote something on this last week, so I'll bring it up because my mind isn't what it used to be. They were involved with a big guy from St. Francis and PA, Josh Cohen, who ended up picking UMass before he was supposed to visit here this past weekend, but instead committed to UMass from last week at the end of the week before he had a chance to visit here. So that's one guy who was scheduled to visit that is now off the board. As of now, they still have two guys that are scheduled to visit. BJ Mack, 6'8", 245 out of Wofford, averaged 16.6, 5-6 rebounds last year. And his finalists are Iowa, Arkansas, South Carolina, Alabama, and LSU. You got to figure that's a tough get. He was at LSU this past weekend. He's at Alabama on the 14th, Iowa on the 17th, South Carolina on 21st, and Arkansas on the 29th if he makes it to all of those. And then we talked about Fairleigh Dickinson earlier, was able to get into the tournament because Merrimack was not able to get in yet because it's still waiting on its probation to get into to be eligible for the NCAA tournament. Stupid rule. Their best player, Jordan Meyer, who was the co-conference player of the year, the Northeast Conference. He shared that award with Josh Cohen, who ended up going to UMass. But this I really like this kid. And his finalists are Iowa, Virginia, Seton Hall, and Florida Gulf Coast. Reportedly will be at Virginia or was at Virginia and Florida Gulf Coast this past weekend. And he's got Iowa and Seton Hall this upcoming weekend. So definitely active. It looks like, Scott, at least, on the surface, without having talked to Fran or the Iowa coaches about this, they're aiming at a certain level of where these guys are coming from. St. Francis, PA, Merrimack, and Wofford. So they're not going for other Power 5 guys in the transfer portal. It seems like they've settled in kind of at a level that they're looking for. But, I mean, you look at these kids, it's not like they're trying to beat out Hofstra and, name another directional state school or something like that for these guys. It's stiff competition, even at this level. Yeah,
sure it is. And I think that's really where, that's one thing about basketball is these guys go to these small schools and they can showcase their abilities, and they grow, they get better.
Philip Bracha,
they develop, and then boom, they have a great year. Philip Bracha being prime among them, in his first year, he was good. Role player, and then last year he was one of the 15 or so best players in the Big Ten, and somebody Wofford or wherever. I mean, all you have to do is look at like some of the starting lineups of like the Bulls championship teams. I think back Ron Harper, Miami of Ohio, Michael Jordan, North Carolina, Dennis Rodman was Southeast Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Is
that school even still around?
Yeah, it's a D2. Central Arkansas for Scottie Pippen, and then you have, but Luke Longley, was he? I think he was New Mexico. So,
Knicks did that too. Charles Oakley, Anthony Mason,
right.
John Starks.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So you have all that, and it's like, these guys play. They play a lot and they play well, and and really once you get past the lottery pick 5-star, high 4 stars,
McDonald's All-Americans, and even though, and that's not always a
right.
guarantee.
Right. But, and once you get past that, then it's kind of like there are a lot of similarities. It's just a matter of geography in a lot of cases. And, if you're considered the 8th or 9th best player in Indiana or in Florida, or, well, maybe not Florida, but, Tennessee or something like that, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, all the main schools around here have already filled their boat. And you're looking around, even in Iowa, AJ Green goes to the UNI. He's a pretty damn good player. Tucker DeVries ends up at Drake. You don't think he can't play at Iowa or Iowa State? Shit. So, I think everybody's fine in this one. Going there, and a lot of times what you get out of those smaller schools is you get less ego. They've had to go through the rough stuff a little bit, a league where maybe they didn't get a fly, charter, they had to take long bus rides and commercial flights, and they didn't get all the bells and whistles. Whereas if you're taking another Power 5 guy who's dealt with it all, and a lot of times they're a little more entitled. I'm talking more generically, but and they've underperformed, at least that they performed if they've been at Wofford or St. Francis or North Dakota.
Yeah. And like we talked about, Minor and Cohen were Northeast Conference Players of the Year. They were deemed the best players in that smaller conference, which gives you a pretty good idea that they could play at a higher level. They're not going to be the best players on their team when they get to that higher level, but they certainly are rotation and, guys that are going to help at the higher levels, at the Power 5, at the, high majors, however you want to classify it for basketball. But it seems pretty obvious. You lose Chris Murray, you lose Rebraca, you lose Connor McCaffrey. They need some help out of the portal. It's a good recruiting class. I don't know as you're going to get major impact. I certainly think you can get contributions from Owen Freeman and Brock Harding and Price Sanford, and who's the guy from New Jersey? I always forget his name.
Yeah,
the other forward.
Yeah, the other forward is
I apologize.
Biltmore.
But you hope to get something out of this freshman class, but you need some veteran help, and we'll see how this shakes out. It's a different era than you just go in there and say, hey, we have playing time. The NIL is a component here, and we'll see how this all plays out.
Yeah, that's where they are right now. And then I think that's, and if you don't have it, I mean, 1 year in basketball can set you back like you would not believe. And if Iowa just can't get the right portal pieces after losing Chris Murray and Connor McCaffrey and what have you, and Philip Rebraca, and they end up 12th in the Big Ten, just a minor setback, well, then that leaves you wide open and exposed. You'll get crushed on the recruiting trail, and your players will know it very quickly, and they'll want to leave. And it's open season on your recruits too. Cooper Koch, stuff like that. So you've got to be very careful, and I don't think anybody should expect Iowa to necessarily go win the national title, but I think it's a matter of, you want them to be competitive, and they're going to have to be competitive in the portal, and ensure that guys like Patrick McCaffrey and Peyton Sanford have pieces, and Tony Perkins have pieces around them that can take that next step. And Jelly is leaving again. This time's for good. I can't imagine that they bring it back. Ogundele never developed. It was unfortunate because it was such a good story early on, and then bringing it back, it made sense. But they could have really used a second post, second center. And whether it was injury, lack of development, or what, it didn't work. And so they're going to need to, and Riley Mulvey is had 2 years now. And can he take that big step? I don't know, and you can only gamble so much. You can only hope for the best so much, because otherwise, again, in the Big Ten, if you don't have a post who can throw down, you're gonna lose half your games right there.
Well, we'll see what the investment is like in the Iowa men's basketball program. You think about the last 3 years, Scott, you lose Wieskamp, Garza. Then last year you lose Keegan and Bohannon. Now this year you're losing, 3 key pieces. If you want to keep it going, you got to invest. Mm-hmm. And Fran McCaffrey certainly has his faults. He's not perfect, but I do trust him as an evaluator of talent. He's proven that time and time again, that he knows guys that fit his system, and they've done a good job of that through the years. Guys that weren't always highly recruited, that have come through and become good players. So I think if he says, hey, this is the guy we should go for, these are the guys we should go for, hopefully he has the support and hopefully it works out, because that's where we are now. It's not just, hey, we got a freshman class coming in and this is what it's going to be like. It's constant, as we talked about with football, women's basketball, constant roster management.
Yeah. Fran does have an eye for talent. There's no question. And he's a good coach. And even the ones that are the upper tier, Jared Utoff, transferring, Tyler Cook, Adam Woodbury, very good players. He missed on some others. I thought, the guard situation 10 years ago, recruiting wise, missing out on Monte Morris was one that I think might, everybody wants to look at Tyler Ulis.
One of those could have changed the trajectory of the program.
Tyler was one that maybe he had it, even though Tyler told me it was Michigan State, if it wasn't. But I think that was because when I talked to him, Michigan State was in the Final Four, so that made sense.
Recency bias.
Yeah, right. I mean, they were in the other locker room that day, they were, and Kentucky was undefeated. But beyond Tyler Ulis, losing out to Kentucky at the last minute is going to happen.
Yep.
Monte Morris was the one I thought that really goes down as kind of the painful one. They have a relationship certainly with Roy Marble, and they didn't have a spot, because they were all in on Mike Gazelle and Anthony Clemens from the year before, and both were good players, but Monte Morris was, the all-time leader in assist to turnover ratio. He was exactly what this program needed. And I think if as tremendous as Iowa has been at probably 4 positions under Fran, the do-it-all guard has been the elusive one for him. Devin Marble was probably the closest, but beyond that, Wieskamp pro, Garza pro, the Murrays pro. They just, Utoff and Aaron White, they're getting paid too, and Devin Marble getting paid, and even Peter Jock and Basabi. But the break it down point guard who can score and can do it all, the Caitlin Clark of men's basketball, although that's pretty elusive. And some of it was unfair, because damn, if he could have had Marcus Page, I might have changed it too. And
we'll see with Dasonte Bowen. He had kind of a up and down freshman year. I think he lost confidence. I think the coaches lost confidence in him. This is his chance now to the opportunity's there with Ulis moving on. So it's up to him.
Yeah. And he's staying, at least, he hasn't announced any changes. I don't know of anything. So he did get to play against Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't completely write him off.
You see flashes there. He's got a chance if he can put it together.
Yeah. It'd be great if there was like a PTL. We could see it, God rest the PTL.
We will keep an eye on and talk more about Iowa basketball, obviously, as we move here through the rest of the spring and into summer and see what roster happens there. We're going to wrap up now. We don't have a ton of time here, but I want to at least talk about Iowa baseball. Was on that great run earlier in the season. Now has kind of hit roller coaster a little bit. Scott lost 3 in a row, won 3 in a row, and now lost the last two games. Saturday was just a heartbreaker, 10 innings, 2-0, but lost the last 2 games in Bloomington this past weekend. Have the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in town this Wednesday over at Banks Field. That is a 4:05 first pitch, and that's trivia night. $2 it's $2 to get in. Can't beat that. And then Minnesota up in Minneapolis this coming weekend. So your only chance this week to catch Iowa is this Wednesday, Wisconsin-Milwaukee at Banks Field. Then next week is at Chicago, University of Illinois, Chicago, Bradley at home. So a couple midweek games, and then a big series with Nebraska coming in the weekend of the open spring practice. So if you're in town for football, going to Kinnick on that Saturday, there's a Friday night baseball game against Nebraska. You can see Brody Breck match up against one of the better offenses in the Big Ten in Nebraska. Then a 2:05 on that Saturday. So you can go to Kinnick, catch the open practice. When that wraps up, go over to Banks, catch that. And then Sunday, the 23rd is Military Appreciation Day, 1:05 pitch there. But it's been the bullpen, Scott. Inconsistency in relief pitching has really been, when Iowa has struggled this year, that's what they're still trying to figure out. It looks like the starters are in a good spot. Obviously, when you have a Friday night starter who's going to be a first-round pick in 2024, most likely, you're in good shape there. The bats have been pretty good and pretty consistent overall, but very inconsistent in the bullpen so far.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, as you mentioned, Saturday, they just have that, they had a really good pitching performance and it got kind of wasted without any offense. And they, got a runner thrown out at the plate and that sort of thing. But, I think this team's still pretty good. It just takes some time. They had such an incredible start and beating LSU and everything like that. It's now, kind of in this little lull. And if they get straightened out, and I expect when you have that kind of starting pitching, not only Brody Breck, I think Marcus Morgan's been really good.
He has. He's definitely settled in.
That I think they got a chance to, put something together. So, it'll be 83 on Wednesday, Rob.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's we've got low 80s for most of this week coming up. So,
baseball weather.
Yeah, perfect.
Wear your sunscreen.
Right. Go over to there and on Wednesday, I guess. And what time is the first pitch there? I don't know.
4:05. So maybe sneak out of work a little bit early, get over there. If you can't get out of work, get over there a little bit late and check it out. But looking at the RPI, Scott, the NCAA's official RPI, Iowa checks in right now at 57, 19-8 overall, 4-5 on the road. 8-1 neutral, 7-2 at home. So where they are at right now, and it's kind of the battle you face, right? The uphill battle you face being a Northern baseball team.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's not always the most fair, but what they can do is just control the games they can control. If they do what they're supposed to do, they'll be in the tournament. That's what I think. If they finish third or better in the Big Ten, I think they'll be in there. And then they've got the kind of team that's built for the Big Ten tournament.
Yep.
They've got frontline starters, and if they can just have some, as you said, some bullpen, if they get a couple of pitchers that can step up and be, hold leads and do all those types of things, I think this is still a very, very good team. It's a sport where you just don't win them all. I'm sure LSU is going, I can't believe we lost Iowa. Yeah. So I guess Iowa could say, well, I can't believe we lost 2 out of 3 at Indiana. But, take care of the ones you can take care of. And that's Wisconsin, Milwaukee, that's Minnesota. And, and then win, say, 2 out of 3 against Nebraska, and you'll feel pretty good.
Yes, got to get back up there and not have any of those bad midweek losses either. You can't really afford that when you're in the Big Ten. Those really hurt when you lose to, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, or Illinois, Chicago. You can't lose those. Get Bradley. Those are and Bradley's probably a little bit of a step up from some of those other. Usually the Valley's pretty good in baseball, but got to take care of business in those non-con midweek games, and then I think Iowa's got 3 or 4 home series left for the Big Ten. Got to make hay at home.
Yeah. You gotta win 2 out of 3. You got to beat the teams you should beat decisively. And then like this weekend, should have won 2 out of 3. They had the opportunities. They didn't get it done. Now, they'll reevaluate, and Heller's a really good coach. So they'll get some mileage out of that. But Saturday was a pain in the butt to go into extra innings and again have a guy thrown out at the plate and then give up a home run and lose. That one really hurts because you're going to lose games. It's baseball, but win the ones that are winnable.
Wednesday night, yes, Wednesday night 4:05 first pitch. Wisconsin, Milwaukee. That's your only chance this week to catch Iowa baseball, as Scott said, temps in the 80s. So good chance to get out there, enjoy the spring weather that feels like summer, and some Iowa baseball. We will talk about Iowa baseball again. Scott and I are going to try to get together again at the end of this week. We've got some football ability on Thursday, so our normal time slot at 9 on Thursdays probably isn't going to work. Maybe we'll push it till Friday. Scott and I will talk, let you folks know when we're going to do this again later this week after football availability on Thursday. Anyway, whether it's Thursday afternoon or Friday morning, will be good because we'll have some fresh content there. But wanted to thank you all for listening. Thank you to our sponsors. We apologize for the long layoff. I think it's the longest one we've had, Scott, in the years we've done this. We usually don't go that long without a podcast, but got back up on the horse today, and we're moving forward, not looking back.
Yep, that's why they put our eyes on the front of our head and not in the back of our head. And somebody who mentioned that to me 25 plus years ago was a guy named Butch Peterson. And God bless Butch Peterson. He was one of the best coaches I've ever been around at West Branch. Fun guy, great guy. Sad to hear about his passing a week ago. They don't make him like Butch anymore. And I just remember, like, today's my 24th anniversary with my wife. Married.
Congratulations.
Thanks. 24 years. It's crazy.
We'll be 22 in the 21st.
Okay. Yeah. Well, congrats early on that. But when I was in Muscatine at the time working, we went on a co-ed bachelor party with some of my coworkers, and we ended up at Herb and Lou's in West Branch and had some beers with Butch. And then a few years ago, I stopped over there at the school and talked to Jeff Bowie, after he committed, and had a lot of reminiscing with Butch about the EIHC in those days. And so anyway, Butch was an institution in West Branch, and like Scott said, all of our best, and to those folks over there who are probably still feeling it and will for quite some time, and are going to go through it again when football season rolls around. Just horrible, man. Horrible disease, and best to him and his family and all of his friends and acquaintances over there in West Branch and everybody else he touched throughout the state. So glad you remembered to mention that, Scott. I know they had a service on Saturday. Was out of town, was not able to make it to that. But I'm sure they'll have some nice things planned for the football season to remember Butch. They've already named the football field after him, so he's got that going. The little Butch Peterson Rose Bowl, right now. I thought it was really cool and touching that a lot of the rival schools in the area left on their stadium lights. I think it was Friday night for him. Tremendous guy, tremendous coach. Some great ones from that era, Rob, the old EIHC, Jim Bellamy and Ed Hansen, and, then of course, Kevin Miller later on at Solon. And but Butch is, again, one of a kind.
No doubt. Rest in peace, Butch Peterson. And Rest in peace to this podcast. We will be back next week to talk to more of you folks, or maybe the same folks.
Yeah.
But thank you for listening. Thank you so much to our sponsors. We don't have any trips planned this next week, so hopefully we'll be back later this week to do one, and then maybe even back at our regular time spot next week. But I think there are football interviews that day too, so we'll see what happens. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. We will be back next week. No, later this week. All right, I'm going to sign off because I'm stumbling all around. Thanks. Scott, say goodbye.
Goodbye, Scott.